My talk tonight is about process, and I'm not going to get in too much detail. This is a document that I put together probably 20 years ago, and I'm I'm proud of what it says. I did it for a reason. Uh, Looking at other artists, I did it. I mean, it's very similar to the process that Howard Pyle taught. Technologies have changed a lot, but still, it really boils down to, and this is for illustration. This is the illustration industry kind of, it's it's really the act of making a picture with an art director. And the things we go through, the ideation, you got to research and come up with the idea. You do thumbnails. And there's different kinds of thumbnails. There's ideation thumbnails where you're just getting the idea down. And then there's thumbnails that you're starting to think about composition and design. Once you decide where you're going to take your picture to realize that picture, whatever resolution you're going to work in, you bring in the things that you need to complete that picture, meaning reference, what kind of lighting, posing, whatever the information is that you need, where the things you can't do from memory, you got to supply it. And then you got to come up with a finished drawing and a value study. Um, all along the way, you're getting approval. You get approval at the thumbnail stage, you get approval final drawing. Sometimes you even do color studies, which I don't have listed on here. And then you get approval on your finish. So real quickly, I've always tried to explain uh, process to people of, people saying, how can I get better faster? Well, learn process. All the artists, not all, but almost all the artists that I really admire and follow are process junkies. Um, Ray may be the most process junkie that I know. He- and I think it's great. I mean, I love the detail in the process because it makes you better. You get before you go to the next step, you get everything right before you go to the next step. I wanted to point out thumbnailing is kind of like where pencil hits paper for the first time, or pen or whatever you're working in. But there's two really different types of thumbnails. If you think about it, there's the two value thumbnail where you use line, which is effective, can work, but it doesn't explain near as much as a three value thumbnail. Because with three values, you can describe all the shapes in your picture. Now, if you were working from, that's a beautiful Sterling Hunley thumbnail, the top one, the two value one. But if you were going to do a painting from that, you might question yourself. It's like, oh, what's going to be lighter or darker, the tub or the wall behind it, or the gown. Um, in a three value, you have an opportunity to work all of that out. And knowing where you're going when you're starting an image is very, very helpful. It's best to have a plan. I'm going to show you some things that I think, I brought up Sterling. This is right out of Sterling's sketchbook. Look at that piece on the right. And then there's the finish he did from it. But this is him using process. And there was a bunch of writing, and I didn't include it, but there was an ideation chase of him coming up with this idea. I think this is really interesting. I know he was heavily influenced by the artists I featured last week, Pierre Bonnard. This is right out of our foundations class, a recorded class that I made. This is a beautiful. This is a relative of mine that is the daughter of my first cousin, Christy, and she was just a perfect model. But even as something as simple as doing a head drawing, just a floating head on a page, I did a thumbnail for it. I wanted to decide where it was going to sit on the page, what parts that I could use in line. And it's a really rough little drawing, but it helps me compositionally design what I'm doing. This is much more involved. This is a painting. This painting came from that photograph. I shot it out of the window of my car. with my iPhone. And, I'm kind of focusing on this area over here on the left-hand side, but I kind of become Ray Bonilla a little bit. And first thing I do is take my photograph, I start looking for interesting cropping, and I put it in, I go into Photoshop and I start moving things around. This drawing, you won't be able to find it up here because everything's changed. I've moved the trees, I've moved the hills, I've kind of designed it and make my own reference. And then I go back and I draw from the reference I'm making. This is what I landed upon. I probably did, 12 or 15 thumbnails until I came up with exactly what I wanted. The painting, it was a demonstration, so it maybe not my best painting, but but I'm not disappointed in it. But the process is all right there. This is a really direct process. This is without photography. This is my one of my father's, pages of sketches. And I love the fact that I could put the two together. And he did a series of these 4, or I guess 5 little thumbnails here. And he landed upon one of them and did the painting from the thumbnail. No reference required. He's working very crude this way. So he doesn't even use any reference, but it's thumbnail, finish painting. There's a group of thumbnails. This was my father's process, where he, instead of looking at photography, he did all of his thumbnailing from memory. And it was just like a design problem. And he would do thousands of these things. And then I can point back to a number, of pages I have of these, of paintings, finished paintings that he completed. So he would go from this to, a 4-foot square painting, little 2-inch thumbnail to a 4-foot square painting. And he'd always say, it's like, I can solve it so quickly, design wise, just in black and white in that thumbnail. There's no reason it won't work with the same proportions up in scale. And then, the other thing that I feel the same way about the process that I use now, which even if I start with a photograph and distort the photograph and end up with this, kind of finished sketch before I do a painting. When I do the painting, I have a good idea where I'm going. And I've already solved everything in value, in positioning. So I never have to think about moving things around once I already start the painting. But I can focus on the material. I can focus on the mark making. I can focus on texture. I can focus on, if I lost edges and color. And it's so much more enjoyable. And I'm much more consistent. And it's helped me create a body of work that has a voice and a direction to it. Process has been very helpful for all of that. I could talk about this for hours, but I just wanted to bring it up and have a little bit of a discussion. Process Skill and Craft is our first class in their illustration program. We have Cassandra teaches the first level class in our painting program, and John Nymeister teaches the first level class in the character design program. All 3 of those class you deal with, in John's case, it's called pipeline, but you deal with the process, the ideation process, the thumbnailing, and we help you develop a process.